Have you ever noticed how laughter is a universal human reflex, yet a joke is entirely local? You can drop a microphone on a stage anywhere on Earth, and someone will step up to it. But what they say into that mic, and why the crowd roars back, tells you more about a country's psychological state than any economic report ever could.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. A microphone is essentially a stethoscope for a nation's heartbeat. And when you look at the 7 most populous countries on the planet right now, India, China, the United States, Indonesia, Pakistan, Nigeria, and Brazil, you are looking at over half the human race. Exploring their comedy scenes isn't just about finding out who is funny. It is about understanding how billions of people process stress, navigate cultural shifts, and ultimately find joy in an increasingly complex world.
Exactly. And I want to start with the sheer scale of what is happening in India. We are talking about a population of nearly 1.5 billion people, and their stand-up scene isn't just growing, it has exploded into a massive cultural force. You have comedians selling out massive international tours, but the core of it feels so deeply rooted in the young, urban experience. What is driving this massive boom?
It is a perfect storm of demographics and digital access. India has a massive youth population entering the globalized workforce, moving to giant urban centers like Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. They are dealing with the friction between traditional family expectations and modern, fast-paced city life. That friction is the ultimate fuel for comedy. What is fascinating is the linguistic remix happening on stage. You hear this seamless blend of English and Hindi-Hinglish, which perfectly captures the dual identity of the modern Indian millennial, or Gen Z. It is observational, it is highly interactive, and it provides a shared space for a generation to collectively exhale.
It is almost like they are using humor to negotiate their changing identity in real time. But then you look at the United States, which is arguably the birthplace of the modern stand-up club format. The dynamic there feels entirely different. It is less about a new generation finding its voice, and more about a fiercely competitive, established gladiator arena.
Gladiator arena is the perfect metaphor. The U.S. scene is deeply institutionalized. You have legendary spots in New York and Los Angeles, and newer epicenters like Austin drawing massive talent. Because the format has been around for so long there, the audiences are highly literate in the mechanics of comedy. They know when a comedian is setting them up, and they demand innovation. You see every conceivable subgenre thriving simultaneously: political satire, absurdism, crowd work specialists, and brutal roast battles. The U.S. scene is a hyper-capitalist market of ideas, where only the sharpest, most resilient voices survive the open mic trenches to reach those arena tours.
That hyper-competitive edge makes sense for the US, but I want to pivot to a place where the stakes of standing on a stage feel entirely different. Let's talk about China. Stand-up there has become a massive, highly lucrative industry, but it also acts as a crucial pressure release valve for a very high-speed society. How does a comedian navigate that space?
It is a masterclass in tightrope walking. The urban professional class in cities like Shanghai and Beijing faces immense pressure, long working hours, intense competition, and societal expectations. Comedy clubs have become sanctuaries where people can finally laugh at the absurdity of that daily grind. But because of the unique cultural and regulatory environment, comedians have to be incredibly precise. The humor leans heavily into clever wordplay, subtle irony, and everyday gripes. It is an improvisational dance around local sensitivities. When done right, it is wildly successful, drawing massive crowds to both Chinese and English language sets. It proves that the human need to vent through laughter will always find a pathway, even if it has to be subtly coded.
That is a profound point. It makes you wonder if comedy is a luxury of a stable society, or an absolute necessity in a stressed one, which brings Pakistan to mind. Here is a country facing significant socio-economic and political challenges, yet there is this incredibly resilient, growing underground comedy scene.
Absolutely a necessity. In Pakistan, comedy is an act of cultural defiance. You don't have the massive, corporatized arena tours like you see elsewhere. Instead, You have this gritty, adaptive scene taking root in cafes, hotels, and private spaces in Karachi and Lahore. It is driven heavily by Gen Z. They are tackling relationships, societal expectations, and everyday absurdities with a really sharp, adaptive wit. When the world outside is unpredictable, gathering in a small room to laugh at the shared chaos is a deeply grounding experience. It is community building in its purest form.
It is fascinating how the architecture of the comedy scene changes based on the environment. In Pakistan, it is intimate and resilient. But then, you look at Nigeria, and the architecture is basically a massive, unapologetic party. The energy in Lagos seems completely off the charts.
Lagos does not do anything quietly, and its comedy scene is no exception. Nigerian humor is joyful, loud, and incredibly bold. It is not just a person standing statically behind a microphone stand. It is a full-scale entertainment experience. You have massive events that blend stand-up with high-energy Afrobeats music. The comedians are incredibly charismatic, using heavy crowd work and deeply relatable jokes about the hustle of daily Nigerian life. It is a celebration of survival and success. The sheer vitality of the Nigerian scene has made it world-renowned, exporting that unique, energetic format across the globe.
It sounds like a completely different frequency of entertainment. It is not just about the punchline, it is about the rhythm of the delivery. Speaking of rhythm, Brazil seems to share that physical, expressive DNA. How does the comedy scene in a country famous for its carnival spirit manifest on stage?
Brazilian comedy is intensely physical and deeply satirical. In massive hubs like Sao Paulo and Rio, the clubs mix sharp stand-up with food, music, and a really vibrant social atmosphere. Brazilian culture has a long history of using satire to mock authority and cope with economic disparities. On stage, that translates into highly expressive, animated performances. The comedians use their whole bodies. It is deeply tied to the everyday lives of the working and middle classes, turning shared frustrations into communal celebrations. It shares that same life-affirming quality we see in Nigeria, but with a distinctly South American flair for theatricality.
So we have the gladiator pits of the US, the subtle tightropes of China, the underground cafes of Pakistan, and the massive parties of Nigeria and Brazil. But there is one major population we haven't touched on yet, and the dynamic there seems almost nomadic. What is happening in Indonesia, specifically in places like Bali?
Indonesia is a really unique case study because it has a dual identity. Jakarta has a growing local, domestic scene, but the global hotspot is Bali, and Bali's scene is heavily driven by the expat and tourist communities. You have these secret, rotating venues in places like Canggu and Ubud. It is a highly curated, almost boutique comedy experience. You will have veteran comedians from major streaming platforms dropping in to do English-language sets for audiences made up of digital nomads and tourists. It is bilingual, it is transient, and it perfectly reflects the modern, borderless nature of global travel.
It is almost like a pop-up comedy ecosystem. You fly in, you laugh, and you leave. But looking at all 7 of these massive nations, a pattern emerges. Whether it is a secret beach club in Bali or a sold-out arena in Mumbai, the underlying mechanism is identical. We are taking the pain, the awkwardness, and the tragedy of the human experience, running it through a cultural filter, and turning it into a noise that makes us feel less alone.
That is the alchemy of stand-up. It takes the subjective, isolating experiences of life, whether that is a terrible boss in Beijing, a bad date in New York, or a power outage in Lagos, and turns them into objective, shared moments of relief. The comedian is essentially a societal alchemist, and as the world becomes more interconnected, these distinct local flavors of comedy are starting to cross-pollinate.
Which brings up a really interesting philosophical question about the future. We are entering an era where artificial intelligence can write a technically perfect joke structure. It can understand the setup, the misdirection, and the punchline. But looking at how deeply rooted these global comedy scenes are in human struggle, do you think an algorithm could ever replicate the tension of a live comedy club?
I highly doubt it. AI can mimic the syntax of a joke, but it cannot experience the stakes. It doesn't know the anxiety of living in a high-pressure urban center or the relief of surviving a chaotic commute. The laughter in a comedy club is a reward for authenticity. The audience is laughing because they recognize the truth in the comedian's voice. Until an algorithm has to pay rent, deal with a broken heart, or navigate cultural expectations, its jokes will always lack the essential ingredient of stand-up, which is vulnerability.
Vulnerability is the currency of comedy, and as we've seen from Mumbai to Lagos, the exchange rate on that currency is stronger than ever. It is a comforting thought, really. No matter how technologically advanced or politically complicated the world gets, our primary defense mechanism remains a well-timed punchline in a dark room full of strangers. It makes you wonder, as these massive populations continue to grow and evolve, what the next great global joke will be and who will be the one to tell it.
Whatever it is, and wherever it comes from, you can be sure of one thing. It will be born out of a little bit of struggle, and it will end in a lot of laughter. The microphone is waiting.
And the world is definitely listening. We've traveled the globe today, dissecting the rhythm, the hustle, and the profound necessity of laughter. Keep exploring those local clubs, keep supporting the voices brave enough to hold the mirror up to society, and never underestimate the power of a shared laugh to bridge the widest cultural divides. Until next time, stay curious.